Hi, welcome back to Watch It Played. My name is Rodney Smith, and this is part 3 in our ongoing series to learn the two-player game Guild Ball using the Kickoff Starter Set, which was designed and published by Steam Forged Games. If you'd like to see the other videos in this series, I'll put links to those in the description below. But here we're going to start learning about the different actions you can take when you activate one of your models during the activation phase. An action can be a movement, a kick, an attack, a play, which is a special ability your model has, or any other activity that has the word action in its description. Now, I said that in this video we'd learn the rules to movement, but sometimes movement involves attacking, so I've decided that instead we should start by learning the rules to attacking first. During its activation, a model can spend one influence to make an attack against an enemy model that it is engaging. To engage a model, the target must be within your active model's melee zone. Let's say we were activating Hooper. The value here on his profile card tells us that his melee zone is 2 inches. Although Hooper appears to be frozen here in this one position, you have to imagine that he has a full range of motion and can actually strike out and hit models who have any part of their base within the 2-inch area surrounding him. However, unless stated otherwise, in order to target something, you must have line of sight to it. In other words, you must be able to see your target. A model is said to have line of sight to another model as long as any single line can be drawn from any part of its base to the target model's base. This line will be blocked if it passes through terrain that affects line of sight or over the base of an intervening model. Terrain objects are optional, and we haven't set any up on our field. But here's an example where we cannot draw a line of sight from Hooper to Mallet because every line we would try to draw between their bases is blocked by Stave's base. Whether friendly or an enemy, another base may block line of sight. And I say may block because if Stave was positioned here, we can draw at least one line from the edge of Hooper's base to the target, so he has line of sight to Mallet. So if a model can see a target enemy, and that enemy is within its melee zone, it is engaging that model. This makes it a valid target for an attack. I should also point out that Mallet here has a melee zone of 2 inches as well, so really both of these models are engaging each other. That said, while Hooper could attack Marbles, Marbles only has a melee zone of 1 inch, so would not be able to target Hooper for an attack. So Marbles is engaged by Hooper, but Marbles is not engaging Hooper. Also keep in mind there's no limit to the number of models you can be engaged by or be engaging. After spending the one influence necessary to attack a model you're engaged with, you then generate a dice pool using the active model's current tactical ability, also known as their tack, shown on their profile. Hooper has 5, so we'll gather 5 dice. This value may be modified by other effects to temporarily give you more or fewer dice to roll. For example, when attacking, a model gains 1 die to its pool for each other friendly model engaging the target enemy model. This is called a ganging up bonus. So in this case, Hooper would gain 2 extra dice as Tapper and Friday are also engaging Mallet. There's also a crowding out effect, though, which says the active model loses 1 die from its pool for each enemy model, other than the one that it's attacking, that is currently engaging the attacker. So if Marbles was here instead, engaged with Hooper, it makes it harder for Hooper to attack Mallet, and he loses 1 die from his pool. But no matter what modifiers may apply, your dice pool can never be reduced below 1, so ignore any further effects that would cause that. Once you have your final pool, 6 dice, in this case, you roll them and resolve a target number test. Many actions in Guild Ball will require a target number test, and although we're specifically doing one right now for attacking, there are general rules related to these tests that will always apply. For example, you'll always have a target number. In an attack, it's the target model's defensive ability, which is shown here. Each die rolled from the attacker's pool that equals or exceeds this counts as a success. Certain effects may modify this target number, however, they can never reduce it below 2 or above 6. For each point a modifier would try to reduce the target number below 2, you instead get to roll 1 more die. Likewise, for each point a modifier would try to increase the target number beyond 6, you roll 1 less die. Keeping in mind, again, you can still never have less than 1 die in your pool. Let's assume these were the dice rolled when Hooper attacked Mallet. Mallet's defensive ability is listed as 3 or higher, so anything rolled less than that is removed, leaving us with 4 successes. Now, some tests will have modifiers that affect the total number of successes after you roll them. For example, in an attack, you now subtract the target's armor value, which for Mallet is 2. So this leaves us with 2 successes. This final value in all target number tests is known as net hits. So we rolled 2 net hits in this attack. A test succeeds if in the end it generates at least 1 net hit, but gaining more will sometimes increase the effect. In an attack, you apply these successes to the active model's playbook. This will generate the final outcome of the action, and we'll learn about the playbook in just a moment, but first let's remind ourselves of the steps that we follow when making an attack. First, the active model spends 1 influence to target an enemy model that it's currently engaged with. It then creates its dice pool using its TAC value and any modifiers that might be necessary. You then roll that number of dice and count as successes any values equal to or higher than the target model's defensive value. Then you will create the net hits by subtracting the target's armor and any other modifiers that might be necessary. You then apply those final successes to the active model's playbook. A playbook is the series of circled values shown on a model's profile. A successful attack doesn't just result in damage, but can also let you do other beneficial things which the playbook provides. You'll always group the symbols that you find here within columns. So Hooper has 5 columns in his playbook, and each net hit that you roll in an attack lets you access columns counting from left to right. For example, with just 1 net hit, Hooper would only unlock this first column. But if he had 4 net hits, he'd unlock the first 4 columns. From the columns you've unlocked, you now pick a single circle, or result, to resolve. In our specific example, Hooper rolled 2 net hits, so we might choose this result, or this one, or this one, or this. The choice is up to us. Now that said, you can only choose a result that you're able to resolve. Though in some cases, a single playbook result may have 2 effects. For example, if Brick performed a successful attack and unlocked all the way up to column 4, picking this result allows him to both do 2 damage and gain a KD or knockdown effect. Although you can only pick a result if it is valid, in a case like this where there are 2 results, you can still pick this as long as at least one of the effects can be resolved. For example, if Brick was not able to perform the knockdown, he could still choose this result to do 2 points of damage. And we'll learn what these effects do in detail in just a moment, but I also want to point out any result you pick showing a colored, non-white background is called a momentous result and generates 1 momentum point for your team. So when picking one of the results from the first column for Hooper, I may prefer the top choice, but if I take the lower one, it will help my team giving it a momentum point, which you might remember are represented by these tokens. Now that said, if your opponent does something to allow them to ignore or cancel a particular momentous result, then you don't gain the momentum point in that situation. Sometimes an attack is so wildly successful that you have more net hits than the number of columns in your model's playbook. In that case, after picking a single result from any of the playbook's columns, you wrap around and start counting from left to right again, with the net hits that you have left over. And from the columns you've now unlocked, you can pick a second result. For example, if Hooper had 7 net hits, he'd get 1 effect from any of his 5 columns. And then, no matter which result he chose, he'd wrap around with his remaining 2 net hits and pick 1 more effect from either of these 2 columns. Roll exceptionally well, and you might wrap around multiple times. No matter how many final results a model generates, they must all be resolved, but in any order the controlling player chooses. So let's go over these effects now. A numbered value is known as damage and represents the amount that you reduce the target's health by. When resolving a damage result, you increase or decrease this amount by any modifiers that might apply and treat that final total as a single instance of damage. If you gain multiple damage results because you wrapped around with your net hits, then each damage result is assigned separately, meaning that other effects that trigger from taking damage may trigger on each damage result resolution. If you see an arrow pointed to the right, this is considered a push, and it represents 1 inch of movement. If the attack generates several push symbols for you, add them together as a single push. So 3 of these symbols would push the target model up to 3 inches away in a straight line without changing direction. Arrows pointing towards the left represent dodges. These work exactly like pushes, except the attacking model uses them to move themselves up to the total distance, and unlike pushes, they can change direction during this if they want. Although I said all results in a playbook must be resolved, pushes and dodges always allow you to push or dodge up to the target value. So you could choose to push or dodge any amount from 0 to your total amount. But we'll talk about the rules for pushes and dodges in more detail during the video on movement. A KD causes the target model to suffer the knocked down condition, which gives them this token. We'll discuss the effects of all conditions in a later video. But if the targeted model was already knocked down, then this effect could not be chosen. If you choose the T result, this represents a tackle. If the target model has possession of the ball, you immediately gain it from them. But if they did not have possession of the ball, you could not choose this result from your playbook. Finally, if you choose the guild ball symbol, which we'll call a GB, you may use it to trigger a character play from this area of the model's profile that shares that exact cost. For example, if Hooper picked the top symbol in column 3, he could then use that GB to pay the cost of the Smashed Shins character play that he has. That said, if you unlock multiple GB symbols, you don't total them up and then spend them. Each column you unlock them from is considered separate. For example, if Tapper had 6 net hits and chose the double GB as his first result, and then from the wraparound chose the single GB may only be spent on a character play with a single GB cost, and the double GB symbols may only be spent on one with a double GB cost. In other words, you couldn't use the double GBs to trigger marked target. We'll learn about character plays in more detail during a later video, but I want to mention that it's possible to trigger the same character play more than once during an attack if you unlock multiple GBs that satisfy its cost, and it doesn't have a once per turn limitation, which is shown here in the column labeled OPT. Tapper's character plays are both once per turn only, so we couldn't perform either of these more than once during a turn of the game. Friday's Dirty Knives character play, however, is not limited to once per turn. So assuming she generated enough GB symbols, she could trigger this effect multiple times during the same turn. Either way, all results that you generate from an attack are considered to be simultaneous events, even though you'll resolve them one at a time, ensuring that you check for any effects that might modify them individually. And with that, you now know how to resolve attacks. And in the next episode, we'll learn about movement as promised. But if you have any questions about anything that you saw here, don't hesitate to put them in the comments below, and I'll gladly answer them as soon as I get a chance. But until the next episode, thanks for watching.